friends, welcome back to Whiskey and Wit. I'm Whitney, and today's video is going to be a broken down tutorial on how I make my framed farmhouse signs. This video is long overdue and I can't wait to share. Stay tuned. I share here and on my Instagram a ton of these signs that I've DIY'd, and I figured out a pretty easy way that you can make them, frame out the signs, and a lot of times we just use scrap wood. So I wanted to run through the process on here because I don't have a video on my channel that just shows you how I make farmhouse signs. So this particular one is a smaller version of a framed sign that I made for Little Man's Nursery. So you can definitely use that stencil. I will link that down below as always. However, if you're looking for a different saying or to put it in a different part of your house, everything's customizable, and I'll run you through kind of what you can do through the process. So let's get started. So for any sign you're gonna make, you're gonna start with your base wood, and this is going to be the size that you want your sign to be. So this could totally vary. And you want 2 cut 1x2 pieces of wood. These are already stained, the same length as the top. And then you want 2 pieces for your edges. Those are going to be the length of your short sides, but then also a lot for the 1-inch overlap from each end so that you make a full frame, as you can see here. The key here is just to make sure that you measure. Then the next step is to figure out your base color. So for here, I'm painting with black Waverly chalk paint. I always use chalk paint or stain, but you could stain this, you could paint this white, you could paint this gray. Your base could literally be whatever you want it to be, which is nice because you can really customize this. So I've done stain and then a stencil, I've done white and then a colored stencil. You could do a lot of different things. So then once that's dry, you're going to want to think about how you're going to stencil on. So if you don't have a Cricut, you could buy stencils from your local craft store. You could cut it out with a Silhouette or a Cricut. You could freehand, you could transfer using the trace method. There's a ton of different ways that you can get the letters onto your sign to have it say what you want it to say. So here I'm just weeding out the letters to make a regular stencil. If you want, you could do it the opposite direction and put a vinyl decal right on, paint over the top, and then peel it off. So you could do a reverse or a regular stencil. But here I'm just doing a regular stencil. And if you haven't done it before, I would say don't mess around, just do a stencil like this because this concept's pretty easy. The other thing here is that I like to use a paper-based transfer tape just so then that way it's not too sticky, so it's not pulling up your stencil when you stick it. I will link my favorite below from Expressions Vinyl. And this is my, literally, you can't miss this step. Like, you have to do this. And I take some Mod Podge, this little guy is just from the Dollar Tree, and I make sure that I coat the stencil, basically where you're gonna put the paint. And what this does is it's going to stick down your stencil so you don't have any bleeding. And you wanna make sure that you are putting it on a pretty good coat, but don't pull too much that it gets under your stencil. So be cognizant of that. And I also do this if I'm using like stencils from Hobby Lobby. So then once that Mod Podge dries, regardless of how you're doing it, then you're going to apply your paint. So regardless of your kind of stencil, this is how I do it every time. I do an up and down dabbing motion instead of a typical side to side paint motion, and I'll tell you why. Even with that Mod Podge, you have a chance of the paint going underneath your stencil. So this will help so it just lays on top, and also then you're not going to have an issue. Then when it is about 50% dry, you don't want to pull it when it's fully dry because then you have a better chance of peeling your paint off of the wood. You're going to wiggle it back and forth, pull it off gently, and then take some sort of weeding tool, tweezers, whatever you like, and get out the little pieces. If you're doing a regular stencil, this won't be an issue because you'll just peel off the stencil. You want to be careful here so you don't put holes in the wood. So then I did say 50% dry, so once it gets 100% dry, then you can go ahead and put on your frame. You can paint your frame, you can stain your frame. I already had this stained for a previous project I didn't do. So you're gonna take your shorter edges and nail them in. Some people use wood glue. I choose not to, but you're gonna wanna use either a hammer or a nail, or we have a nail gun, but you definitely don't need that. I've made these before with just a hammer and nail. Then you're going to want to go around the whole sign and make sure that you have enough nails that you feel like the frame is secure. Some people use more, some people use less. It's really just personal preference. One more step that is optional is adding hanging hardware to the back of the sign. You can easily get those at your local hardware store, but this one was going to stay on the shelf, so I decided that I didn't need it. I hope this video inspired you to create your own farmhouse sign. You do not need a Cricut, you do not need a nail gun, you do not need all of those crazy fancy things. You can definitely do it with a hammer, some wood, and using your buddy at Home Depot to cut the wood for you. So if you end up recreating the sign using the techniques or just making your own sign, I would love to see it. Head over to my Instagram, Facebook. Be sure to tag me Whiskey and Whit on there. Also be sure to follow along over there because that's where all of the updates happen when I'm not here on my channel. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Oh, don't forget to hit subscribe down below so you don't miss a future video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.